Meanwhile, in Ukraine, soldiers and citizens are celebrating successes in eastern Ukraine. But in other areas, fierce fighting continues, and some military experts question Russia's claims that its forces are simply regrouping.
The idea that there might be Russian reinforcements somewhere, I think, sounds unlikely. It's certainly not impossible, but sounds unlikely. And that implies that the Russians are going to have to make some choices about how they distribute what they have left. If the Ukrainians can keep moving quickly, then they may be able to keep the Russians off balance and actually attack Russian weak spots on the front lines, as they have been already.
Ukraine says it's making good progress, but Russia denies this, saying Ukraine is suffering heavy losses. For more on that and a potential shift that we may be seeing, we're joined by Susan Ormiston in London. Susan, thanks so much for joining us. You just left Ukraine. What do we know this morning about Ukraine's what appear to be rapid gains in the east of the country?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say they have been rapid gains over the last 5 to 7 days. They're saying this morning that Ukraine has captured 20 more settlements around the Kharkiv region and into the Izium area. And that comes on top of a weekend of social media videos showing the unfurling and hoisting of the blue and yellow Ukrainian flag all around those eastern areas, and soldiers celebrating with villagers. Now, part of the problem is the military has imposed strict restrictions on media. There's no longer any ability to access those battle areas with the Ukrainian military, so it is difficult to verify. But there are simply too many reports of gains and too much territory. The Institute of War this morning is saying that Ukraine has captured more territory than Russian forces have captured in all their operations since April. So this is real. The question is, what else is happening? We spent the last few days down in the south region, Mykolaiv and areas south of there. You know, there's Kherson, which is still occupied by Russia. There's a front, the counteroffensive. A lot of talk about that in the southern area before the Kharkiv advances. We haven't heard as much about advances around Kherson, although they are trying to degrade the military positions there. And we do know from observations alone that there have been casualties. We were on the roadside and saw buses full of injured Ukrainian soldiers coming to a staging point for ambulances to take them further along into Odessa for treatment. So there definitely is heavy fighting in the two-pronged counteroffensive in the east and the south.
Susan, this does sound significant, but what has been the Russian response on the battlefield and consequently Russia's reaction at home?
Well, there have been a couple of key marker points, haven't there? We heard that Russia did acknowledge that they had moved their troops from Kharkiv. Ukraine says that's fleeing. Russia says it's regrouping. But they definitely have moved back. In some cases, Ukraine says all the way to the Russian border, and they are reorganizing. And the question posed in our clip from Matthew Ford that you aired is, what do the Russians do? How thinly spread are they in these eastern areas, and what will be the response? Well, we saw a little bit of that last night in Kharkiv. Missile attacks on key infrastructure, on a power station, knocking out power and water to Ukraine's second largest city. That is the missile terror that we've seen so much from Russia over the last 5 months. And they will continue to do that, to remind Ukrainians, you may be pushing us back on the territory, but we can get you from the air. Now, the air defense systems have denuded that response a fair bit, particularly over the capital, but it still is happening, we have seen. And at home, another interesting response. We are seeing, for example, on the Russia's state newscast last night, the key headline was that there had been a week, the most difficult week on the front lines in Ukraine's war, and some of the commentary shows are talking now about whether Russia should pull out or whether it should order a full mobilization in order to counter these rapid Ukrainian advances. So a very interesting situation in Ukraine going into this week. And the question is, what will Russia do, and how can Ukraine hold the gains that it's made?
A complicated situation, potentially getting even more complicated. Susan, thank you so much for your expertise on this. Susan Ormiston on the latest in Ukraine, and she joined us live from London.